Well, welcome everybody. Welcome to our fall speaker series for the Friends of the Hannon Library. Good to see you. I'm Roy Scarborough. I'm this year's president of the Friends of the Hannon Library. And one of the things I do is I invite everybody to become a member. We have the forms over there. And what we do as an organization is that we help enhance the library for the students, for the faculty, and also for the larger community, our learned community that might like to use our facilities. So the other thing I do at the beginning of the meeting is I observe a tradition, and the tradition here at SOU is a reinstatement acknowledging the presence of Native people. We do it every time. And it acknowledges the presence of the Native people historically, and also those who continue to live among us. So here's the statement. The Friends of the Hannon Library take this moment to acknowledge that Southern Oregon University is located within the ancestral homelands of the Shasta, Tacoma, and Lagawa peoples who lived here since time immemorial. These tribes were displaced during the rapid Euro-American colonization, the gold rush, and armed conflict in 1851 and 1856. In the 1850s, discovery of gold and settlement brought thousands of Euro-Americans to their lands, leading to warfare, epidemics, starvation, villages being burned. In 1853, the first of several treaties were signed, confederating these tribes all together, who would later then be referred to as the Rogue River Tribe. These treaties transferred most of their homelands to the United States, and in return, they were guaranteed a permanent homeland reserved for them. At the end of the Rogue River Wars in 1856, these tribes and many other tribes in Western Oregon were removed to the Siletz Reservation and the Grand Ronde Reservation up north. Today, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians are the living descendants of the Tacoma, Shasta, and Lagawa peoples of this area. The Friends of the Hannon Library encourage you to learn about the land you reside in and then join us in advocating for the inherent sovereignty of Indigenous people. All right, now, today we're going to honor my favorite literary genre and a fine writer of it, the short story, and Tom Dodson. And to that end, I'm going to ask our library director, Dr. Carrie Forbes, to introduce Tom to the rest of us.
Thank you all very much. My name is Carrie Forbes. I'm the university librarian, and it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Thomas Dodson. Tom is an assistant professor and librarian here at SOU. His short story collection, No Use Pretending, was selected by Gish Jen for the Iowa Short Story Prize and published by the University of Iowa Press. He holds graduate degrees, it's a long list, from Iowa State University, Kent State University, and the University of Iowa, where he was an Iowa Arts Fellow at the Iowa Writers Workshop in Fiction. His fiction has appeared in the Missouri Review, Gulf Coast, the Cincinnati Review, and elsewhere. His short stories have been awarded the 2022 Robert and Adele Schiff Award and the 2020 Jeffrey E. Smith Editors Prize. His story Keeping was selected by the editors of the Best American Short Stories as a distinguished story of 2022. And then Tom and I have an ongoing joke. He has this on his blog too. He likes to say that he lives in Ashland, Oregon, by the grace of the hoofed ruminant mammals that are its rightful overlords. And I like to argue with him that I now believe the wild turkeys are taking over as the overlords of Ashland. So it's my pleasure to turn it over to Tom so he can tell you more about his short story collection.
I want to thank the Friends of the Hannon Library for sponsoring this event and giving me this opportunity. And I want to thank all of you for coming. I see, friends, colleagues, students. Any one of you could be home in your pajamas right now with a bowl of ice cream, screaming something, but instead you're here, and for that I'm truly grateful because I understand that temptation. So I'm gonna read Keeping, a story from the collection, and I thought about this, but I'm gonna read a very brief comment about it out of respect and regard for the students here who of which we have many who are Samoan. So before we begin, I do want to say a few words. I'm going to read about the story I'm going to read. There's a character in the story who plays the role of antagonist in opposition to the main characters. It's mentioned at one point that this character, Fetu, is from the Samoan Islands. I chose to make this character Samoan because there's a large population of Samoan Americans in California where about half the story is set. These folks many of them work as farm and factory laborers. I imagine this character as a labor organizer, persecuted and then fired by the owners of an almond grove. After losing his livelihood, he gets mixed up in a criminal enterprise. And because of the way point of view works in short stories, it's limited often. We don't actually get his backstory in the text, so he just appears as an antagonist. So I just want to assure readers that I don't intend for this character to stand in for all Samoans or to align the story with nativist and anti-immigrant ideologies, which I categorically reject. So I'm happy to discuss in the Q&A the choices I made in the process of writing the story, or more generally about the issues involved in selecting point of view and crafting characters whose identities may differ from that of the writer. So with that said, I'll move on to the story. I notice as my head, if I lift my head up or down, it changes. When I'm here, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Eating. It was a humbling thing, asking for help like this, eating it so badly. But removing his hat, brushing flakes of snow from brim and crown, Guy knew there was no other way. His neighbor's fields, already stripped of corn and soybeans, would soon be a single plain of snow, patches of winter rye, the only green for acres. Cold winds would blow freely across all that flatness, gathering strength until they reached the stand of pines at the edge of his apiary. The trees would provide a break, and he could wrap the hives in tar paper to keep out the frost, but it wouldn't be enough. His bees, what was left of them, they wouldn't survive an Iowa winter. He needed to take them west. He'd been standing on the porch of Taylor's place, weighed down with what he meant to ask. He heard the baby crying. It wailed and wailed, a helpless thing, full to the top with need. When it hushed, he opened the screen and knocked. Taylor's wife answered. She had the baby with her, his head covered in wisps of fine brown hair, face pressed to her breast, sucking away. Guy coughed and looked down at his shoes. "Come in," Andrea said, unconcerned. "Taylor's out back finishing up." He followed her inside, ducking to avoid the transom. 40-odd years lifting supers filled with honey, each box heavy as a newborn calf, had stooped his shoulders. But all told, work in the bee yard had done him good. He hadn't dwindled like other men his age, was still broad-backed and tall. He knew to move carefully in these old farmhouses. In the dining room, his eyes were drawn to the glass-windowed cabinet. Built to house pickled beets and bottles of homemade jam, Taylor's wife had stocked it with books, their spines emblazoned with words like feminist, gay and lesbian, queer. He could remember a time when it would have been dangerous to have such books where people could see them. Ain't much difference, his father had said, between a cocksucker and a communist. "You're in your Sunday best," Andrea said. "Business in town?" She lowered herself into a chair and settled the baby on her lap. "The bank. Every once in a while they like to bring you in, turn you upside down, see if anything falls out." She smiled politely. In truth, it was only for this visit that he traded his work boots for Oxford, set aside his overalls, and retrieved his suit from the back of the closet. He had worn it last 10 years ago at Alma's funeral. The back door cluttered shut, and Taylor called from the kitchen. Something got at one of the hives, scat on the ground, and some bees chewed and spat out. "In here," Andrea said. "Guy stopped by." "Oh, yeah?" Taylor said cheerfully. She strode into the room, wiping her hands on the front of her jeans, the cuffs still tucked into her socks. She placed a hand on Andrea's shoulder, bent down and kissed the baby's head. The chair next to Andrew was stacked with papers, and Taylor cleared them and sat down. Should have phoned first, Guy said, shifting in his seat. You're always welcome, you know that. The tips of his ears burning, he looked at his hands. These bouts of bashfulness, they sometimes happened around Taylor. She was just so, he couldn't think of a better word for it, handsome. She reminded him of James Dean in East of Eden, and also vaguely of Milton Law, a high school classmate and the first boy he'd ever kissed. Brought you this. Setting his hand on the table, he retrieved the package from under his arm, a square section of honeycomb in a clear plastic box. He'd selected for his offering a product of his strongest hive. Workers had filled each of the cells with amber honey, sealed them over with the freshest wax. It was a beautiful comb, light-capped and neatly cut, something to be proud of. You didn't have to do that, Andrea said. You know, Taylor keeps trying to win me over to the dark stuff. Her face crinkled as she shook her head from side to side. It's not for me, though. Too funky. I've always been too funky for you, Mirena. Taylor had seeded a portion of her land with buckwheat. Bees that fed on its white-petaled flowers made dark honey, near to black, nutty, and pleasingly bitter. More traditional, Guy kept his meadows stocked with wildflowers, Shasta daisies and black-eyed Susans, clover that bloomed in shades of white, pink, and crimson. His bees rewarded him with a sweet, light honey he sold to grocery stores, driving in each week to stock the shelves himself. You say you got some critter nosing into a hive? What do you think? Taylor said. A raccoon? Skunk, more likely. You can put up chicken wire. She'll have to stand up on her hind legs, and the bees can sting her belly. Or you can set a trap. The baby began to fuss, and Andrea excused herself. She bundled the boy in a sling and carried him away, her flip-flops slapping as she mounted the stairs. Guy sat across from Taylor in silence. Most of the time, it was easy between them. They'd known each other for going on 8 years now, ever since she'd come to the beekeepers' meeting at the VFW hall. She'd had so many questions, been so eager to learn the trade. Pardon me, being over something. He'd invited her to join him in his bee yard, a kind of apprenticeship. Later, when he got a call from the fire department about a swarm hanging from a picnic table in Happy Hollow Park, they'd gone together to capture it. They'd smoked the bees, doused them with sugar spray, and shook them into one of his spare supers. He'd given her the box and all the bees inside, her first colony. Together, they cleared her backyard, transforming it into an apiary. She ran her own operation now, passing on the craft. That was how their friendship worked. Guy offering help and advice, passing on the craft, taking pride in Taylor's success. But this, asking her for help, real help, the kind that involved sacrifice, it felt wrong. Guy, is everything all right? You seem, bothered. It's been a hard year, he began, a real hard year. He told Taylor about the outbreak of nosema. Bees with swollen guts had deposited smears of brown diarrhea down the sides of the supers. They fell from the boxes, littering the ground with their hollowed-out carcasses. Others perished mid-flight, some bearing fat wads of pollen, food their spore-ravaged stomachs could no longer digest. He'd lost other hives to mites, passed from bee to bee until they reached the brood chamber. There they fed on larvae and laid their eggs, fouling whole colonies. And then there were the bees that ranged beyond his meadow. In August, he found a pile of dead bees in front of one of his hives, the rest stumbling around like they were drunk. He couldn't prove it was chemicals killing them, but during the summer months, he'd see plenty of crop dusters swing low over the nearby fields, raining pesticides down on the corn. That was as much as he was willing to say to Taylor, or anybody else. The truth, he knew, was that he was to blame for the bees' decline. Off-tree honey had been a family business, his wife and sons all chipping in. After the boys went away to college and Alma passed, he'd hired help for processing and bottling, an accountant for the books, seasonal workers whenever he needed an extra hand. But the bees he cared for them himself, alone. It had worked out fine for a couple of years, but last summer, not long after his 73rd birthday, he found himself standing in front of a hive, not sure what he was doing there. The cover was off, his smoke was spent. Had he set out to harvest honey or check for a sick queen? Since then, he kept his logbook close, looked up things he'd once kept in his head, when and how much he'd fed each colony, whether he treated them for pests. And then there was the time he lost the book, wasted a whole afternoon searching. He spotted it the next morning, scrambling eggs over the range. On the shelf by the window, the frayed binding sticking out from a row of Alma's cookbooks. Pests and chemicals hadn't killed his bees, at least not on their own. Some died every year, but well-tended colonies could bounce back. He owed his losses to sloppy stewardship, enough to put his whole operation at risk. He'd failed his charges, left them vulnerable. I treated the hives for mites and all, he explained, headed towards the sickest ones. All told, I'm down to 1/3 what I should have this time of year. Not enough to make the contract out west. Colony's too weak to winter up here. Jesus, Taylor said, leaning back in her chair. If I'd have known, maybe we could have. So what are you going to do? Get them indoors, a bar or something? Then buy nukes in the spring? Guy chuckled bitterly. With what money? And besides, I can't wait for the thaw. First winter storm and I'll be finished. He couldn't bring himself to look Taylor in the eyes, so he looked instead into the kitchen, at the high chair and the sink full of dishes. I can see you've got your hands full here, and I hate to ask, but hey, Guy, whatever you need. Taylor reached across the table. Forgetting himself, he gripped her fingers. There was no sorting out everything he felt. Humiliation, gratitude, a shameful urge to seize and cling to the sudden closeness between them, for it to mean something it didn't. He released her hand and straightened up in his chair. He was a foolish old man. All the bees I have left, they're healthy, you've got my word. Her lips slightly parted, Taylor waited for him to explain. The California trip, the almond bloom, it's good money, real good money. He retrieved his notes from the breast pocket of his suit, unfolded them and set them in front of her. Now inspections, truck rental, equipment, that's all settled. He tapped twice on the top of the page where he'd written out all the expenses. That comes out of my end. The profit, though, we split 50-50. I got a Class A license, had it for years, so I'll do the driving. Guy, what are we talking about here exactly? I leave in 3 weeks, but I don't have the hives. Not enough anyway. I need your bees together with mine. I'm sorry to come asking, but I need you to come with me to California. A rumble strip throbbed beneath his feet, and Guy nudged the truck away from the shoulder. The wind was up, and he had to keep a firm grip on the wheel. The sky was a monolith of low gray clouds, spitting needles of sleet against the windshield. In spite of the weather, things had gone easy. He managed to keep his cool when tailgaters blew their horns to swing the trailer into traffic as they passed through Des Moines and Omaha. Taking charge of a 20-ton rig, sending it hurtling down I-80, it might have intimidated another man. But back in Vietnam, he'd been the driver for a Patton tank, crashing through the jungle, taking point on thunder runs, top speed with one track on the asphalt, the other spraying mud, all guns firing, praying they didn't hit a mine. And anyway, he'd made this trip before, every year for the past 5, and always on his own. That morning, he found Taylor on a porch, slumped in a rocking chair. It was before dawn, and the house was dark. He hadn't asked if Andrea would be seeing them off. The stars were veiled, and a rabbit flung itself into the dark as he turned his headlights to the bee yard. He helped Taylor load her hives onto the flatbed next to his own. When they were ready to leave, he offered her the little mattress behind the driver's seat. He's raised children too. Knew how hard it was to get a decent night's sleep with a baby in the house. Taylor said no, promised through yawns to help navigate. Hours later, and she was still out cold, strapped into the passenger seat, her temple pressed against the glass of the cab. There was a sign for gas, and he took the exit for the travel plaza. Taylor stirred and looked around. Everything okay back there? She said, putting a hand through her dark, upswept hair. Sure, they're strapped in tight. We had some weather, but that's what the tarps are for. Taylor looked once over her shoulder, then drew a phone from her chore coat. Splashing sounds came from the speaker, then a woman's voice, a rhythmic murmuring, together with a child's happy clamor. Andrew sent a video, she said, Oscar in the tub. The warmth that spread over his face, it had nothing to do, the warmth that spread over her face, it had nothing to do with Guy, but watching it made him feel close to her. The brakes hissed, then sighed as he eased the rig alongside a bank of diesel pumps. She tapped briefly on the screen, then pocketed the phone. Tank's on my side, I'll fill her up. All right, he said, I think I'll stretch my legs. You know how to work that thing or what? Said the man in line behind him. Guy was staring down at the card reader, his fingers hovering over the keypad. Had he already paid for the gas? Your card's run, the cashier was saying. Just need your PIN. Place like this, no reason to think they would cheat you. In any case, best to play along. But looking down at the blank place on the screen, he couldn't conceive of what numbers ought to go there. He had to put in something, but if the numbers were wrong, they'd make him start all over. Step aside, some of us have loads to haul. Just a minute, Guy grumbled. Alma. The number had something to do with her, but how? And where was she anyway? Still in the bathroom? Every damn time. And if it wasn't her, it was one of the boys. Couldn't get more than 60 miles without having to pull off somewhere. But no, that was a different time, years ago. He was here with Taylor now. The card, the machine. She needed him to pay for the gas. He glanced over at a display rack. Did they have that gum he liked? The kind that tasted like licorice? Hey, I'm talking to you. Someone tapped him on the shoulder. A trucker. He seemed to be grinding his teeth, the muscles along his jaw visibly taut. One of his arms was badly sunburned, the pale underflesh fringed with translucent patches of dead skin like a molting reptile. Quiet now. Guy turned back to the machine, waving his hand in the air as if swatting an insect. The next thing he knew, Taylor was there, saying his name. Sneering, the trucker turned to Taylor, sized her up. And who's going to make me? You, your little boyfriend here? He looked both exhausted and agitated, kept awake by chemicals capable of anything. The cashier, secure behind her bullet-resistant window, watched warily but said nothing. 50 on pump 9, Taylor said, shoving a wad of bills into the metal drawer beneath the window. Happy now, asshole? Kai, take your card. We need to go. When they got back to the rig, Taylor reached under her seat. She unzipped her nylon bag, packed with snacks and other essentials, and drew out a handgun, trigger and barrel secured in a molded plastic holster. You okay to drive? She asked, arching her back and tucking the pistol into the waistband of her jeans. I'm fine, he said, not sure yet if he was. He started the engine. Let's go then. I don't want that psycho following us. Her birthday, Guy said when they were back on the interstate. What? The pin, 5448. Alma's birthday. How could he have forgotten a thing like that? It wasn't until hours later when they traded the foothills of Arkansas for the Colorado Rockies that Taylor stopped checking the rearview mirror, peering into the cabs of every semi that got too close. Later, they pulled into a Safeway parking lot in Grand Junction, as good a place as any to spend the night. Guy insisted Taylor take the sleeper cab. My truck, he said when she protested. My rules. And that gun, we need to talk about that too. Can I have a look? Taylor considered and took the pistol out of its holster and handed it over. I guess I should have said something about it. Probably, he said, checking the safety was on. An all-metal, hammer-fired semi-automatic. A newer model, but not so different from the Colt 1911 carried in Vietnam. This size, I think it would be chambered for .45 caliber, but it's light. It's a .22. I take it with me when I go camping. Pretty far from the woods, he said, handing it back. Don't tell Andrea, all right? She doesn't understand about guns. I guess it's your own business. It is, Taylor said. 2,000 miles to somewhere I don't know anybody, where truckers and farmers and drunks, any man basically, can decide he doesn't like my clothes or my walk. I know what they're like, what they do. No way I'm ranging cross country and leaving my gun at home. It occurred to him that his idea of Taylor's life might be distorted. His notion that she'd had it easier, never knowing a world that expected her to hide, at least not the way that he had. But refusing to hide, even now, no doubt there were risks to that too, things he knew nothing about. Well, all right, he said, forcing a grin, so long as you don't point it at me. Taylor was settled. Guy folded himself into a sort of crouch in the passenger seat, feet propped on the dash. He tried to quiet his mind. The incident at the truck stop had left him shaken. The way he'd fallen out of the world, it was like slipping on black ice. No warning, no chance to catch himself. And that trucker running his mouth as if Guy was nothing at all. The worst of it had been Taylor standing there, a witness to his infirmity. He tried to apologize, but she just shrugged. No big deal, she said. She forgot things too. Passwords, birthdays, the names of Andrea's nieces. If she expected there was something he wasn't telling her, she seemed willing to let it go. No point going into it anyway. He only needed to stay vigilant, focus on the task in front of him. A few weeks is all, and then he'd be back home with his bees. He kept bigger secrets than this from neighbors and friends, from his children, and for much longer. Given the state of my voice, that's pretty much half the story, and I think that that's enough time. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all very much. I'm happy to answer questions.